Hello and welcome. My name is Alex Brownsell. I'm the editor at M&M Global, and we are at Cannes Lion 2015 in the gorgeous surroundings of the Havas Cafe. When in Cannes, you've got some of the world's leading experts in content around, so we thought let's gather a few of them together to discuss what achieving content excellence in 2015 really means. I'd like all of the panel to hopefully introduce yourselves, starting from the left, just your name, job title, and who you are.
Sure. I'm Jay Lauf. I'm the president and publisher of Quartz, QZ.com.
Hi, I'm Stacy Fuller. I am head of content for Havas Media North America, and I also lead a piece of business called Cake.
Hi, I'm Hayler Romer, vice president and publisher for The Atlantic.
Hi, I'm Marcus Stoll. I'm head of marketing EMEA for NewsCred.
Well, thank you very much all for joining us today. I'm just going to throw out a minor question, a little thing. What does good content look like today? Can it be defined? Is it something that you can put a really tight definition on?
I think content is about storytelling. So I think that consumers are consuming more and more content than ever before, thanks to so many distribution outlets and social media. But I think when you look at the content that performs the best, it's real storytelling. So do you have something that you want to say that's compelling, that's going to connect with people on an emotional level? Emotional being sentimental or funny, or something useful for this person. So I think if you got a good story to tell, that's good content.
I mean, is it something that comes down to the experience? Is it down to the quality of the actual content itself? Is there a particular thing that will help define content?
I think that good content used to be content that was simply accessible, it was accurate perhaps, and it was something that was maybe relatable. But now I think, just like Stacey's talking about, I think what really is making content stand out from other content is ambition. And I think you have to be really excited about the possibilities of what you can do with content and think about both the creative possibilities as well as all of the things that go into it in terms of accuracy and the storytelling. But there's no reason why you should lack in ambition at all in terms of competing with some of the greatest newsrooms on the planet or creative shops. So if you have the right ambition, I think you can have the best content out there.
And I do think that's where quality comes in, to your point. The thing I like about content in 2015 is we're in a meritocratic ecosystem, really, because content will find an audience, and that audience will share that content if it's good. So the very heart of the thing to me is quality. And that's a very subjective notion, which we could debate, but quality content will find an audience, and I think that's a critical piece of it.
I think to expand on that, the one aspect of quality that I think really, or that we at NewsCred think makes really good content is authenticity. There's so much content out there nowadays, it's all anyone talks about, and people can spot a fake or someone who's not really behind content from a mile away. So for us, it's all about really connecting in short bits through authentic, could be images, conversations, really anything, but as long as you're authentic and you really stand behind the content that you're putting out there, I think that for us is what makes that experience for the end user.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned authenticity, and my next question was going to be actually how brands can stand out from the crowd. There is so much content out there, and it is so competitive, but also the extent to which they want to stand out from the crowd without losing that authenticity for the actual brand message. I mean, is there a line that can be struck?
I think that there are a lot of brands that try to shoehorn themselves in conversations that just don't feel right. I think a brand, I'm quite interested in a lot of the predictive technology and a lot of the conversation technology, so you really understand what consumers are saying. I think it's important to brands to understand what their consumers are saying, not just the larger landscape. So here's what my consumers are interested in. Is there a story there for me to tell? And make sure that that's an authentic connection. So yes, you want to be part of that conversation, but how can I look at my brand attributes and what my brand's about to really understand how do I insert myself in an organic way into that conversation, and how can I tell a story that's going to resonate with those people?
And I think we should talk about exactly that, the delivery mechanism too. How do you insert yourself into it? Because there's a big question there. But in my world, which is more the B2B world, Quartz reaches global business professionals. I think in that kind of vein, the companies who are marketing content to that kind of professional audience, I think staying authentic is actually tapping into your own thought leadership. By virtue of being in the business sector that you're in, you can bring to bear a lot of direct, very useful information, and not straying from that is a critical piece of it. So as a quick example, if you're Goldman Sachs and what you're going to publish is your macroeconomic outlook for the year ahead, that's authentic. That's something people, business professionals are going to want to hear from a Goldman Sachs. I think tapping into that kind of authenticity is a relatively straightforward proposition in the B2B space.
Yeah, I'd say expanding on that, I think you don't always just want to hide behind your brand either. Like, you want to highlight the people behind your own brand, because that's what ultimately builds that connection to make that content authentic. In the case of Goldman Sachs, maybe they'd want to do a quick profile on the people that really drove that report forward, and like why they're experts in the space and why you should trust them. It's about really bringing to the front those people in your business that are the true experts, and not always just staying behind your logo or your company name. It's important to make that connection on a person-to-person level.
Right. So there's the notion of authenticity, but then there's also the idea of making the content something that people really truly want to engage with, especially if it's living beyond their the brand's own platform. So the way we like to think about it is, being brand-centric versus idea-centric. And so if you've got the right notion, the right idea there, you can just find the right way to weave in the brand so that you are authentic to what the brand does. But at the same time, what you want to do is make sure that the content is good, right? And so you still do have that same ambition to put something out there that's going to change the conversation, but then organically weave your brand in.
Absolutely nowhere more than can you see the impact of technology on the industry that we're all in, and the changing face of the industry. And technology is also changing the way that content is consumed, from magazines and newspapers to video. And is that making life harder, or is it making life easier for brands to, and content creators to connect with consumers? And what impact does it have when that content is being consumed on a mobile, on a device?
Well, I think it's doing both. I think it's making it harder for people like us that have to stay on top of all of this, and making sure that we do have our finger on the pulse and we understand the changing behaviors. We're talking about rapid progression here, so consumers are changing their behavior every year, every 6 months, and so we need to make sure we are on top of that. It gets easier though, in that there's so many tools out there now to really help us use listening to understand where conversations are taking place, understand who our consumers are, understand, we're able to make content easier and faster and better and distribute it, much easier, and then measure it. So you've got these tools that are making it easier, but at the same time, just trying to keep ahead and trying to keep on the front foot of that changing behavior and technology, is not an easy task.
And I think you have to be careful, as you say, as you move to mobile. I think you've got to be really careful how you, again, back to the delivery mechanism, how you insert your content into that experience, because a mobile device is it's so much more a personal device. You're paying close attention to what you're doing in there, and if there's suddenly an intrusion on what you went there to do, the pitfalls are dangerous.
Yeah, I would add to the list of challenges with technology and changing consumer behavior the fact that whenever you're going to produce something, you can no longer just think about producing a simple article series or just a video. I mean, if you have a story to tell, it can be told in so many different ways, and it should be, most likely, right? So if your audience is coming from different devices, where they're paying more attention to video, you should tell that story in the best possible way from a video perspective, but not ignore the fact that people are still reading, and you've got to tell it from an article perspective or a written perspective as well. So what it means is it's much more planning at the onset, much more dedicated time and resources to creating any one piece of content, which is a huge challenge for anyone.
Yeah, I'd say to expand off that, I think it's good to start off thinking about what are the bite-sized chunks that you're going to be able to pull out of whatever piece of content that you're creating. Because those bite-sized chunks a lot of times are what ends up being delivered to the individual on their phone, whether it's a quick tweet or an image or something like that. So I don't think it really detracts from the notion that long-form content is really valuable for brands. It's just you need to be creative with kind of how you break that up and deliver it to the consumer, because it's not easy to read a full article on your phone. I mean, screen size is increasing. It's becoming a little bit easier, but it's more about figuring out how you can break that up and then make it easy and accessible and quick for people to get it on the go, really.
Well, yesterday a huge conversation topic was around vertical format and how people just refuse to turn their phone sideways to consume content. And so, we've always been creating content for a television screen, and now we're having to completely rethink how we create that content. So to your point, we have to make content now for a mobile device, as well as, we know people are still consuming content on their TV, on their tablets, and so all of a sudden we have to really think about those different consumption methods and how we need to adjust.
The other challenge, I suppose, for publishers, for advertisers and agencies is international, is global, because as we move towards a new operating system for brands, we're finding that they are going to try and target consumers on a global level, and that's with content as well. How do you make content global and make it relevant for a global yet local audience? I mean, it's an oxymoron, right?
Well, fortunately, content's right now very visual. So that does do a lot of heavy lifting, because visual is, a global language. If you are attracted to an image, you're attracted to an image. And then I also think that, going back to the tools, we have a partnership with NewsCred from a content management solution, which has really been helpful for our global teams to coordinate together, because now all of a sudden you're able to, create a playbook that different countries are able to weigh in on, and so you're able to share thoughts and images and work across that framework, and then people are able to make that content their own for their own local market. So I think looking at visual and looking at different tools and publishing tools and coordination tools really helps make your different markets work better together.
Yeah, I'd say from NewsCred's standpoint, we have clients that operate in 50, 70 different markets around the world, so like very, very global presence. And I think for them, it's just a lot of work to make the content global. You can't approach it from you're going to make one piece of content that's going to work for everyone. It just doesn't work. There's too many differences in unique kind of niche markets that result in people, if you just make it bland, people aren't really going to connect with it on that level that we talk about people needing to connect with your content on. So you need to just spend the time and have kind of boots on the ground, if you will, of people that have expertise in those individual areas to how you can tweak that content. And it's fine to have, again, that bigger kind of high value content piece that's a little bit more broad scale in terms of the coverage. But then as far as those kind of bite-sized chunks that I mentioned before, that's where you need to get really specific and hyper local, because more effectively you're able to target your content and your creation and your strategy, the better it's going to perform. It's just a simple formula.
And those global markets, each one of those global markets is in a different stage of advancement in terms of accepting, sort of the paid content formats and how you deliver. Some places in the world are, very akin to the Western media market, highly evolved and ready to do it, and a lot of others are not, is what we find. But I agree with you. What we've done at Quartz is source, writers, content creators on the ground in the locale. So with GE doing the Quartz India program with us last year, you put people inside their GRC, their Global Research Center in Bangalore, to pull out those local stories, and then also speak in a voice that you're not over-explaining certain local mores, customs, things that are going on in that market, which you might do if you're doing it from a Western perspective.
Right, just to have that more universal applicability.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that Quartz recently launched in Africa, I believe, and emerging markets. What challenge does that pose?
Emerging markets? It's. I think we're still figuring that out on some level, but it's what I was just sort of saying. Some of them are ready. So India has a very highly evolved media marketplace. It's fairly sophisticated. There, you're able to both work with and against, sort of entrenched players. Africa seems to be, at least as I can tell right now, we're focused on sub-Saharan Africa. There's more of a vacuum in the market. I think we're going to have to go in and try to create a market of our own. And we're only 3 weeks into that experiment, so I don't, we'll do this next year, and I can tell you what the learnings were. Yeah.
From NewsCred, what do you see in emerging markets? Any trends?
I'd say the methods of delivering your content is probably the biggest change that we see. Some of the methods that we use here, Twitter, Facebook, things like that, might be a totally different application in an emerging market. It's something that you didn't consider initially, but that's widely used and really influential in that place. So from our standpoint, it's just really being aware of just the different nuances between the markets, both from the content itself in terms of how your messaging comes off, but then as well as how you're delivering that content out.
Connectivity, dumb phones versus smartphones is a big issue in those marketplaces.
We've talked best practice, let's talk bad practice. From a publisher perspective, from a brand perspective, how do you think, and you can name names please if you can, or don't if you'd rather not, could you give us any examples of the ways that you think brands and publishers do?
I'd have to think about who's doing it badly. What I can tell you is the way in which we're seeing the best type of content be created is when you go as upstream as possible. So it's elongating the conversation, it's letting publishers in as early as possible, fully briefing them, downloading them, perhaps bringing them into your practice and letting them really understand your challenges so that we can bring to bear any of the tools or technologies that are necessary to tell that story for our audience or put it in any type of format that's necessary. I don't think that everybody's quite evolved to that place. I think we do still see a lot of 24-hour turnarounds, really quick requests, and demands for things that don't necessarily allow for the latitude for great thinking that that would produce great content. So I think that people still have a ways to go. But in many cases, we are seeing, as more and more people are focused on telling bigger stories and working with fewer partners, we are seeing people being brought in much earlier in the process and let under the curtain in areas where days past we would not have been.
What makes your head shake with despair?
Okay, I'm not going to name names, but I think that the one pitfall is, and I'm talking about mainly social and micro content because it's fast, right? And I think that brands think it has to be fast like that, and there's no approval process, there's no structure, there's no organization, and I just think that that is a really irresponsible way to publish content. So I think that clients and agencies, if they're working with an agency, should insist on having a solid approval process in place. It's about using predictive, creating content in advance, getting sign-off from whoever you need to get sign-off, using content management solutions like NewsCred so that we actually have a system to know exactly who reviewed what their feedback was. If we have UGC, is there approval attached to it? Did legal sign off on this before anything gets published? So when you see a lot of these, I can't believe brand X published this, well, we're trying to make it in a world where that would never happen. So to me it's about organization, having the right tools, and really having a playbook and a process.
Quartz is a relatively recent launch brand. You had a clean slate to work from. Was there anything that you thought, let's avoid this?
Yeah, so to me, it's in the UX is one of the other places that they make a mistake is trying to intrude on the experience and over-insert. So we just actually completed our second year study of a thing we call the Global Executive Study. So we have 1,800 executives from over 90 different countries responded to a survey on their media consumption habits. So it's everything from time of day to device types, but one of the series of questions got at the heart of how do you react to things like sponsored content. And by far the top two biggest turnoffs are interstitials and pre-roll, which is a real conundrum for marketers who are desperate to get that content in front of them. But I think you have to let back to quality. That's why quality matters, because you have to let readers, viewers, consumers experience that in an authentic. The reason native is such an overused term in our industry is you do have to have them experience it natively. So that's a challenge that we've avoided by the infinite scroll approach that we adopted from the beginning.
The other thing I would just add to that is the notion of KPIs, right? I mean, that's another overused term, right? So people want to know, what is it that's going to prove success without really thinking about what success looks like. So we want to achieve X, Y, and Z, but why? Why do you want to achieve X, Y, and Z? And let's think about the audience you're talking about. So if people spent more time thinking about actually who this person is, where they are, what they're doing, I think the conversation would shift around, what's proving that it works, and ultimately the best content would win in each environment.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think that ladders up perfectly to my kind of bad practice would be focusing too much on just quantity. How many shares did you get? How many page views? All that sort of stuff. Like at NewsCred, we're trying to take the conversation away from, okay, we had 10,000 shares, but down to, well, who are the 10 most important people that shared that content? So it's more about the individual behind those shares than it is just the fact that someone shared it. So like one thing we're doing here with Cake and Havas is kind of through our platform bringing those people to the top so they can see who the most important people are based off a variety of factors, and then we can reach out to them and try and engage them in further conversations or at a deeper level, because we know that those are the really important people that matter with these shares. Yeah, there's always going to be some quantity of your shares that are just not real quality. Could be spam, bots, all this sort of stuff, or people that just aren't really related to your industry. So it's about being able to identify the individuals behind those shares that we think is a practice that's challenging and that everyone struggles with.
Well, we're embarking on a study right now. It's in market called Return on Conversation. So to that point, we're really trying to understand how valuable our impressions are. Everybody instinctively knows that if a friend shares something with you, that probably holds more weight than if a paid piece of distribution was sent your way or interrupting your day. Or if an editor recommends something, that might mean more than a random person you might be following on Twitter. So what we're trying to do is really parse out and understand how valuable each of those interactions are, so that you're not just giving blanket KPIs and blanket number of impressions, but you're actually putting a tangible dollar value to understand how effective each of those different pieces of engagement were.
And finally, to wrap up, I'd like you all to sort of try and have a think about if there's one thing that's exciting you most about content, the potential of content, where it's going next, what we might be talking about in 12 months' time. If there was one thing you had to choose, what would it be? Have I got any takers? It's exciting you.
What I'm most excited about, frankly, is the meritocratic aspect of it, which is why I keep bringing that up. I think that when you start getting beyond ads that are placed wherever they are placed and you go to content, the only way that content survives, does its job, is if it's good enough to actually get somebody to engage with it and then pass that on. And that's the big promise for marketers, right, is that word of mouth aspect of it. And what I love about that is I think that is a flight back to quality, because I think the only way it works is if you pay attention to quality. And for any of us who are doing what the four of us do, I think we actually care about that deeply. And so that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, I'd say from NewsCred's standpoint, I think the most exciting thing is going to be the development from more of a individual campaign approach to just like fully integrated practices. So, with the Internet of Things now, you can really start to engage with people everywhere they are, and you kind of build this really rich, full picture of their interactions with your content and what they're into. Whereas in the past, it's more been like, okay, well, we'll get them on Twitter through this campaign and Facebook on this campaign. Now you're starting to build this kind of overarching umbrella that's really bringing all those together in a single view and with like single kind of big picture campaigns that then tie into all these smaller funnels underneath it. So that's what I think is really exciting.
Mine's shoppable content. I'm a shopper, and so I think if you take compelling stories and you're actually able, right now, I mean, obviously there's shoppable content, but let's be honest, it is clunky. I scroll through Instagram all the time. I don't want to have to, I'm busy, I don't want to have to click to other things before I can just hit a button and be able to buy that product. And obviously, Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest are starting to develop products so that it is making it more shoppable, which is great for marketers, probably not good for my wallet, but that, as a marketer, is what I'm really excited about.
And I would say I'm excited about both ambition and talent. Ambition in the sense that I think people are really widening the aperture for what they want to expose themselves to and the things that they're really open to creating and different ideas they're open to sort of bringing to life. And from a talent perspective, we're seeing so much interest with really talented journalists, designers, developers wanting to come over to the branded side because there's so much opportunity there, and looking at a brand like The Atlantic and saying, hey, you know what, we have the opportunity to really put an Atlantic stamp on something that's branded. That's something that they might not have had the opportunity to do before, and now we're seeing that happen. So that's really exciting. I think over the course of the next year, we'll see more and more great talent migrating over to this side of the business and producing more great content as the ambition continues to grow from the publisher side as well as the marketing side, the brand side.
Thank you very much, guys. So much food for thought and so many pearls of wisdom there. Really appreciate your time, and hopefully catch you around later in the festival. Thank you. Thank you.